Thanks, Bob. And thank you all for being here. I want to start with a procedural question, which is actually more than that. It has been my experience over the years, many years of covering Washington, that former governors who are senators deep down would rather be addressed as governor than senator, even once they are in the august body. Would you rather me call you Governor Manchin, Governor Hoeven, or what do you
Well,
prefer?
if you're asking what job we enjoyed,
yeah, what job?
Governor.
Governor.
Yeah,
It's a pretty universal answer. Yeah.
No question, that's true, Ron. Matter of fact, among a lot of the senators, I get called governor probably more because I was governor for 10 years, and that's how I got to know a lot of them.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, everybody has a nickname, and that's kind of what I get called.
Now, I mean, people often say that it's a different personality. I mean, as a governor, people like being a governor because they can make decisions. That, things happen.
Well,
as a senator, you express opinions.
I think basically it's either who you are. Are you more of an executive type, or are you more of a legislative type? Do you like to kind of debate and kind of wonky on policy,
Yeah, right.
or do you say, hey, okay, let me get the best of the best, give me the ideas, let me mull that around, make a decision, and go with it. I enjoyed it so much, I didn't want to go to bed at night when I was governor. I couldn't wait to wake up in the morning. I knew.
How about now?
I knew I could help.
Now you can't wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
Now I just have a hard time sleeping.
Yeah. Slight difference, right?
But the thing about it was, you're just so energized as governor. I knew I could help somebody every day. I knew I could make a difference in someone's life in West Virginia every day. That's a great feeling, knowing you can help somebody. And that's truly what public service is.
Yeah. Beside the difference, kind of the structural difference in the job between, doing and kind of opining, there is something else. It is not news to anybody who follows politics that we are a very divided country. I mean, we saw that in the election with very clear patterns of support and opposition, which we're going to talk about a little later. And we've seen it since the election. The interesting thing about today is that we're going to be introducing in a few minutes 5 really extraordinary innovators who have been able to build coalitions in their local communities. I mean, been able to it hasn't all been sweetness and light. They're not going to sit here and tell you that it's all been kind of easy, but in many cases, you're able to kind of work across the boundaries at the local level. And I'm just wondering, as you kind of move up the ladder from the community to the state to the federal government, where obviously it is much harder to bridge our differences, where does the kind of sense of common interest begin to fray? I mean, where does it begin to pull apart in your experience?
Are you talking about politically?
Politically, in terms of the ability to get things done. I mean, not just politically in the sense of running for office, but politically in the ability to have disparate groups reach common ground. It's obviously harder at the national level than it is at the community level and either than the state level. What makes it harder?
Well, I mean, there's a couple things. First, going back to what Joe said a minute ago, he's absolutely right. Some people have more of a business mindset, executive mindset, so being governor, laying out that plan, and then working, and you have to work in a bipartisan way to advance your agenda, try to bring people together. That suits some people's mindset better. Others like more the debate, more the court concept where you each push for your idea, and the back and forth hopefully generates the best ideas, and that's more of a legislative approach. And that may be why we have so many people who are trained in the law that are in politics, because it's that debate, almost like the courtroom debate. But in terms of the country, you also have to keep in mind that any given state, you may have a very large state, so there's a lot of people you have to mobilize, but here, we're in essence making policy for 320 plus million people, and they all have a point of view. And people forget that as legislators, we reflect the views of the country. So some of that divide you see in the Senate,
it's not just
the
you,
House,
right.
It's reflective of our country increasingly going to the right and the left and away from the middle. And our job is we've got to figure out how to bring it back to the middle, because to do big things, whether it's healthcare reform or infrastructure or tax reform, to get it done, you're going to need Republicans and Democrats, and to make it last, you're going to need both.
My main thing is basically, when I was governor, I basically how I run my life. You get your financial house in order. If your financial house is not in order, you got problems. You'll make cowardly decisions. We all do. You get behind the 8 ball, you start robbing Peter to pay Paul, and you make cowardly decisions. Get your financial house in order. Then find commonality. So right now, and I've told President Trump this, I said, you need some wins. You need some wins on the column. And the bottom line is infrastructure. I don't know a Democrat or Republican that doesn't have an infrastructure problem. That's some commonality. I don't know a Democrat or Republican doesn't have an addiction or an opiate problem. That's something we could cure. It's a silent killer. It doesn't pick Democrats or Republicans or liberals or conservatives. So once you find that and get a start, you got it. We've been so far apart for so long. We've got to find something that brings us together. Healthcare is not it. We know that. And why they went down that rat hole, I have no idea.
What are the lessons you take from that rat hole?
Well, I just said this, that basically right now, I can tell you, as Democrats, from me to Bernie Sanders, okay, that's a pretty big wide swath. There's no way that we're going to vote to repeal. Okay? That's not the bill that I would have voted for if I was here in 2009, but we've got it. And it's done, and it's basically integrated in. My hospitals, my rural clinics, all of them would collapse if you take that away. I got too many people. Now, I've said this. You know, you can buy a box of Cracker Jacks, open it up and get the prize inside, and there'll probably be an instructions how to use it. We gave 20 million people health care, not one word of instructions how to use it. So you tell me there's not some savings there, some energy savings, efficiency savings, and then on the top end, you can't give $575 billion in tax cuts to the people that need it least. And then you have $880 billion of cuts where the people that need probably more help. And think that we're going to come together on that. So I said, get repeal. Quit talking about repeal. Talk about repair. You tell West Virginians you're going to repeal something, that means you're taking it away. You tell them you're going to repair it, that means you're going to fix it. Now you tell me psychologically which one works.
You know, Governor, Senator, Governor, Senator.
See, we got him doing it.
You know, you got me doing it. If the House had passed this bill, you know, at 208 in Tom DeLay fashion, 3 a.m. in the morning, 217 votes, it would have landed in the lap primarily of Senate Republicans. And, you know, it was a bill that would have passed entirely on a party line basis. Would that have given you anything to work with, even if it had gotten through the Senate and the House?
We'd had a lot of work to do on it. For example, take the tax credit. They talked about a refundable tax credit ranging from $2,000 to $4,000. Clearly, that needed a lot of work because we would have had to increase that tax credit so you could actually go out and buy a policy. And going to Joe's point, meaning bringing down where you start phasing out so you can increase that tax credit to a higher level and then have it a function of both income and age, and then maybe start phasing it out at $50,000, have it phased out at $75,000, increase it so somebody could actually buy a policy. That's one side. The other side is you've got to make the transition from the Medicaid expansion work. Okay? And so the House was talking about two options. They were talking about a block grant or a per capita block grant. But then you've got to have some other features to make sure that the states can actually transition and that people have access to coverage, whether that's through the Medicaid piece or through the refundable tax credit piece. Remember, the key is you've got to make sure people have access to health insurance. That's the key. They have to have that access. And that's the transition. And if you can start to make that transition, then now getting back to Republicans and Democrats. So he says, well, you know, he just won't repeal. Republicans say they have to repeal. He says, oh, it's got to be repaired. Republicans say, well, it can't be repaired, it's got to be repealed. So somehow we've got to get past that issue and start to work together.
The word access.
But Ron, they talked about access. We've always had access.
Yeah.
You know how we used access before we had any health care? Emergency room. You know how a working poor used it?
Yeah.
Workers' comp.
But that's not what we mean by access.
We use it at the most expensive delivery point that we had.
Right.
And it wasn't working.
I want to move on from
as a governor, we end up paying.
Right, but that's not what we're talking about, access, somebody going to the emergency room. We're talking about making sure they have access to health insurance they can actually afford.
You made an interesting point, Senator Hoeven, when you were talking a minute ago. You said that the states, it's not only just that the legislators can't get along, the states themselves are pulling apart in many ways. And it is, you know, we saw in this election enormous divides between the states, also between urban and non-urban areas. Hillary Clinton won 88 of the 100 largest counties in America. Donald Trump won pretty much, you know, he only won 400 more of the other 3,000. He won more counties than anyone since Reagan. I like to say he won every county in America with a cow in it. But at a moment,
picture of one.
Yeah, or a picture of. At a moment,
I'm from a state that is pro-livestock. I'm telling you right now. Pro-cow.
Yeah, the exception to my
I don't know if they have any cows in West Virginia, but we have
cows, but they blame
millions.
us for methane. You get more methane from cows than we get from coal.
The exception to So my question is, you know, the issue comes up a lot is our difficulty reaching consensus Because our legislators, you guys, are too inflexible, or because the country itself is pulling apart and is losing interest in making accommodations with people of differing views?
I'm the most centrist. I mean, I don't.
Yeah,
know
you are.
I don't know what I am. I tell people I am fiscally responsible and socially compassionate, and I think most Americans fit in that category. I'm not far left, and I'm sure not far right, but I look at common sense. What would I tell my children? What decision would I make in my household? How would I run my little business or being part of a workforce? How would I expect for that to be successful? Why can't we operate that way? John's not always wrong, and he's not always right. But boy, his opinion sure means a lot to me, okay? We take that, and as governors, we couldn't tell who was a Democrat or Republican in the National Governors Association.
All right, but let me challenge you on this question. I mean, I think the question, if we're asking the question of, is the country willing to compromise with itself? At a moment when the states are diverging so much, can everyone simply represent the interest of their own state and still expect us to reach any kind of meaningful consensus on the big challenges at the national level, Governor?
Ron, that's why I say for these big solutions, we need Republicans and Democrats. It looks like we're going to go on to tax reform. Maybe we include infrastructure in there as a way to help make it more bipartisan, get more Democrat support, right? And the thing is, when we do big things, to pass it, we need Republicans and Democrats, but to make it last, we need Republicans and Democrats. Otherwise, you're just going to have one side attack it and undermine it until it implodes, rather than having both sides willing to kind of say, put some skin in the game and say to the public, look, this, you have to give a little to get a little. This is a compromise, but it's going to help everybody.
Let me put a point on it by being a very immediate current example. The question I'm asking is the balance between representing your state and representing the nation. The Clean Power Plan from President Obama. President Trump began both from energy producing states. Certainly you are on the very front line of that in coal. You have said that you have praised President Trump for repealing, or beginning the process of undoing the regulations of President Obama. Wait, hold on. And that, as representing West Virginia, that makes sense. What is the obligation, if any, of West Virginia to the country and the world to participate in a solution on climate change?
Well, first of all, West Virginia's provided more energy per capita than any other state in the nation. I mean, we've got two world wars, domestic energy was provided. 2 world wars, industrial might that we have. The middle class has been created because of it. This little state's given everything.
Yeah.
If you didn't have, I've said this, if you don't have base load 24/7, and everyone believed today that we're going to do everything with renewables, and you could do it, fine. If you had commercial hydrogen, fine. You don't. So if you believe the renewables, tell me what 5 hours of the day you want your electricity to work. What 5 hours of the day do you want your refrigerator or your heat and air? That's what you're dealing with. So there's more coal being burnt in the world. For where I really, with the Obama administration went head to head, I said, if you're talking about global climate, then don't take the premise that you believe that wind and ocean currents start and stop in North America. That's how you're approaching global climate. There's more coal being used. Our NATO allies don't even use what we've already perfected. And they made us go to a higher level that wasn't even attainable. That's what we were saying.
So representing energy producing states in each case, is there any step?
Let me make sure this, Ron, you know this. I'm an American first. I want my country to do well. I want my president, whoever that president is, to do well. And I'm going to do all I can to support and help them. Now, with that being said, if that works well, my state of West Virginia will do just fine. And everyone puts this in perspective. Is it all about local politics? Well, politics is local. But they've got to understand, when I go home, I said, listen, I'm going to do what's great for this country. And if the country does what's great basically in back, we're going to do fine. We got really identified in the last thing, and they said war on coal. There was a war that we thought was declared because there was no pathway forward. I said, Mr. President Obama, use your taxes and your tax credits. If you want to go to a renewable and just removing your energy policy, then basically make the people that take advantage of the tax credit to go back into the areas that lost the jobs in energy and give them a chance. We can build windmills. We can build solar panels. We didn't get a chance for anything. They left us high and dry and said, fend for yourself.
Senator Hoeven, is there any step toward reducing carbon emissions that energy producing states can or should support?
You have to create the legal tax and regulatory climate that encourages investment. That investment drives the technology. The technology not only produces more energy from all sources in a more cost-effective, more dependable way, but it also improves your environmental stewardship. Then to Joe's point, remember, you know, we're not isolated in this country. It's a global economy. That technology that we develop then will be adopted by other countries around the world, and that's really how you get energy with the kind of environmental stewardship
that you want. Does tax framework include a tax on carbon?
What's that?
Does a tax framework include a tax on carbon, as
No.
the Republicans and Jim Baker and Hank Paulson have proposed?
No, it doesn't. You want to encourage the investment, right? And you start, in essence, the president's CO2 plan, he really stepped in front of Congress with his so-called Clean Power Plan and in essence imposed through the regulatory means a tax on carbon. And when Congress refused to do it. And what that is that shut down coal plants and prevented the very development and adaptation of the technologies you needed for the kind of environmental
People basically think that we want, if you come from an energy producing state, they look at me and say, well, you want to throw the environment out the window. That's not it. There's nobody who wants to drink dirty water or breathe dirty air.
Right.
But basically, the Clean Power Plan jumped in front of the EPA, Corps of Engineers, who had always done the permitting process. They jumped in front of that, gave it to the OSM, put 200 more regulations on top, which are redundant, just to kill an industry. And basically, the industry is not going to be dead anywhere else in the world. And if we thought that we were going to lead the way, basically, we're not even making our allies or our trading partners use the technology we perfected. SOx, scrubbers, low NOx boilers, baghouses for mercury. We've done all that. Carbon capture sequestration is the one thing that we have to be able to do more cost effective and efficient. We haven't done that yet. Haven't proven basically commercial. We just said work with us and we'll fix this thing.
Let me talk to you a little bit about...
Let me add there, there's a difference between something being technically viable or technologically viable and commercially viable. And so we've got to make these things commercially viable so the industry can implement them. And then, like I say, other countries around the world will adopt that technology. That's how you really get...
We are for a balance of the economy and the environment. If you don't find a balance in life, you're out of balance. You're in trouble.
Let me ask you a little bit. Let's talk for a few minutes about the role of groups like those we are honoring today, all of which are involved in dealing with, as will be revealed in a few minutes, difficult problems at the local level. They spent enormous amount of effort trying to build relationships in the communities and deliver services to people who need them, and also empower them to deal with their own problems. Their biggest problem, in many cases, is kind of a stable source of funding. When you look, particularly when you were governors, but also as senators, when you think about something like the opioid crisis, what is in your mind the balance between things that government can do directly, and where does government, in fact, need to lean on community groups to make the interventions?
Well, the opioid addiction started from government. Basically, it was the VA. 1980s basically said the fifth element of wellness was pain. So they're going to treat pain. That's how Purdue Pharma says, oh, I got a perfect miracle drug called OxyContin. 24 hours relief, no addiction. Well, we know that wasn't factual, and that, the cat's out of the bag. So then you have the FDA. So think about this. As a consumer, you have the FDA basically saying we have a product here that's been tested and safe for you. Then basically the DEA says, okay, we're going to put so much of this product on the market. So now it's two government agencies. Then you have the most trusted person in your life next to your family member, a doctor, say, take this, it'll help you. And before you know it, we've got a full-blown epidemic on our hands. 200,000 Americans have died basically in the last 10 years, 15 years. And in West Virginia, we have the highest rate of any state in the nation. 818 people died. That's more than car wrecks. We have no treatment centers whatsoever. For a family member to come to you and says, I hope that the police will arrest my son or my daughter and convict them because I can get them in the drug court and save their life. That's what we're dealing with, and every one of you knows somebody in your family, extended family, or a close friend that's been affected. And if we don't do something, we're going to lose a whole generation.
So what have been the most effective interventions that you have seen? Where does it come from?
Well, we have, Huntington, West Virginia is ground zero. I mean, it's awful what's going on there. They have now a center of excellence at Marshall University. They're taking it from conception to birth all the way up through adulthood. They've got to educate. They've got to prevent females who become pregnant from, and they're addicted. That baby's born into addiction. Then that baby has to be detoxed before it goes home. You send the baby home, and we got the baby detoxed, and the baby goes home and the family is a drug addicted, I guarantee 99% chance that baby will grow up and be an addicted person. We've got to start basically education. We've got to get the DEA. We have some legislation we've got to present and pass, Democrats and Republicans, that allows the DEA to start restraining what they're putting in the market. FDA, I told President Trump, I said, Mr. President, you said for every new regulation agencies want to put out, you want to take 2 away? Do me a favor. For every new drug, opiate drug that FDA approves, make them take 1 off the market. We don't need them all.
So let me ask you, particularly as governor, where did you find it most effective to work with groups rooted in the community? What could they do that government could not?
And the opioids crisis is a good one to talk about in terms of the community, because it has to be a comprehensive approach, right? You've got to start with education. We've got to educate our kids at a young age as to the dangers of opioids. These new drugs are so powerful, that they can try some of these drugs and it can be fatal. So we've got to educate, we've got to prevent, and then we've got to treat, we've got to work on recovery as well as the law enforcement piece. And that takes the whole community, doesn't it? So when we passed CARA last year, which was legislation starting to get at this opioid crisis, what it really did was work to empower the local communities. And I'll give you an example. In Fargo, North Dakota, the mayors there with West Fargo and Moorhead, Minnesota have all gotten together and set up a blue ribbon committee to mobilize everybody, the educators, law enforcement, healthcare, first responders, and to draw down resources from the state and the federal level and to really get at this in a comprehensive way. And that's what it takes. And that is all about the community engagement and the comprehensive teamwork it takes to get at it.
The doctors need to be educated on prescribing. They should be licensed and basically have to go through continuing education. For they should keep dispensing this stuff like it's M&Ms. Doctors are.
You both have to get back to work. So let me ask you a final question. Where, if anywhere, are you optimistic that, in fact, there might be enough consensus to get big things done in this Congress? Are there areas that, after the healthcare event, that you think might actually produce more progress?
I really think that infrastructure. There's not a Democrat or Republican that have a bad road, a bad bridge. Less connectivity needs help somewhere in infrastructure. That's something we all agree on.
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to have tax reform for that. Will the tax reform give us enough spin-off to pay down debt? Does anybody want, so we have a philosophy, no new taxes, you need revenue. You've got to pay down debt. $20 trillion going to $25 trillion.
So a net tax cut would be a non-starter for you?
Well, it doesn't make sense. Tell me what you're going to do with the $20 trillion of debt. Every time we talk about something, we've got sequestration, everyone's griping and complaining, can't do this, can't do this, this cut back. What's your purpose? What's your role? Be a leader. Don't be afraid to take a vote. The worst thing you can do is go home. That's pretty good.
I think tax reform is an area where hopefully we can come together. And as Joe's talked about, maybe if we bring the infrastructure piece in, then we as Republicans who want a reduction in taxes and believe in dynamic scoring, economic growth generates revenue, not higher taxes, can attract Democrats to come over and say, yes, there's going to be an infrastructure piece with this, maybe through repatriation and so forth, and in that way start to bring Republicans and Democrats together and do a package that is both tax reform and infrastructure.
Yeah.
I agree.
You agree?
Hey,
all right, good. All right. Senator Hoeven, Senator Manchin, thank you.